Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Give everybody a minute here to get connected, to get your audio set up.
Hi, everyone.
If you're joining Community Alliance with Family Farmers, collaborating with Ellen Raleigh, Creative and Strategy, on our webinar on Value-Added Producer Grant program and the scholarship opportunity, you're in the right place. I know the California Small Farms Conference was this week, so there's been a lot of webinars. So yeah, hopefully you're in the right spot. We've got a number of people still joining us. I'm gonna get screen sharing here. Probably kind of have a soft start.
Like all the tables and both of the canopies.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us, folks. My name's Kaylee. I'm the Farmer Services Director here at CAF, or Community Alliance with Family Farmers. Really excited today to be presenting this webinar on a fantastic opportunity for farmers to access scholarship funding to help applying for the Value-Added Producer Grant. And then hopefully, if your proposal is funded, then get even more funding support to help with bringing and expanding your value-added product to life. So let me share screens. Oops, what's happening? All right, we on our intro slide, Ellen?
Yes.
Great.
Am I muted?
So thanks, folks, for joining us. I think we still have we have everybody admitted right now, and Ellen, thanks in advance if you see anybody else join in the next minute or two for adding them. While we're getting settled here, we'd love it if you could type in the chat box what type of value-added product do you want to sell, or are you currently selling and you'd like to expand upon or do something different with? We're curious to know, folks on this call, what kind of value-added products you're interested in. And if you're calling in and it's hard to reach the chat box, you can feel free to unmute yourself and briefly share out verbally if you'd like.
Gideon says peppers, all the peppers and beans, which I love. Yes, peppers is always all the peppers. You don't end up with a few peppers. You got quail meat, hot sauce, jams, preserves, pickled things, green drink, ooh, and fish. Awesome. Mushroom jerky, super cool. Any expense that can be reimbursed with the grant. Awesome. Yeah, we'll talk about reimbursing. Sweet. Yeah, it's helpful to see what people are interested in because there's a lot of different products and produce that this grant can be used to cover. So as we talk, I'll reference examples that have to do with what you all are doing. So just feel free to just keep putting them in and I'll check the chat as we go. Cider vinegar shrubs. Yes, yes.
Great. Thanks, Ellen, and folks for putting that in there. Yeah, feel free to keep adding, and we'll continue on here. So CAF, or Community Alliance with Family Farmers, is a statewide nonprofit organization that's been around for over 40 years, and we work to build a sustainable food and farming system throughout policy advocacy and on-the-ground programs that create more resilient family farms, communities, and ecosystems. Our organization at this point in time has 4 main program areas. These 4: farmer services, farm to market, ecological farming, and policy. And within the farmer services team, that's the team I'm on, we have a food safety support that we are able to provide, technology support with website development, and even like hardware with tools. And then recently in the last couple of weeks, we've launched our wildfire program, and really excited to have a full-time person on board to help farmers prepare for and recover after wildfire. So that's a little high level about the organization. And now we're gonna do a little bit of introductions about ourselves. I'm the Farmer Services Director at CAF. I have a background in organic farming on a 20-acre vegetable farm for a number of years with a large CSA, and then also went to graduate school in public health. And I just can't keep my hands away from the soil. So I also on the side run a small farm and business called Seed and Gather that focuses on a lot of dried products and body products made out of infused flower oils, things like that. Grace is our Farmer Services Program Manager at CAF, and she is not on this meeting today on video, but she will be working with any of the farmers that get the scholarship application that are working with Ellen on helping with the application process. She's got organic farming experience in Georgia and Colorado, and recently completed her master's degree in community development from UC Davis. And she's based in Sonora, California in the foothills. And she also provides a significant amount of food safety technical assistance on at the farm level for like fresh produce level, and then a little bit related to value-added products. So that can also come and help with this project. And now I want to turn over to Ellen.
Hi all, my name is Ellen Raleigh. I'm the founder of Ellen Raleigh Creative and Strategy. I wear a bunch of different hats. I work mainly with farmers who are doing value-added production, because that is something I got really passionate about in college when I lived in Thailand and saw the difference between rice farmers who had control over selling their final product versus rice farmers who are just selling into the commodity market. I kind of went into policy for a while, and then just like Callie, I couldn't keep my hands away from the soil. So I started working at urban farms in San Francisco and found my way up to Petaluma, where I live now, working for a ranch that eventually wanted to start a jam line. I very naively said that was something I knew how to do, and along the way figured out all the compliance pieces and the marketing and the sales and the labels and all that stuff. And when I left that position, I just kind of organically started writing this grant for people and doing other kind of go-to-market and compliance projects for farms who are interested in value added. So I've now written this grant since 2017. I actually see a few of my clients here. An awesome thing about this grant is that you can apply multiple times. And yeah, I have 100% success rate with this grant, which is a wonderful thing to be able to say. And I've gotten funding for farms, about $800,000 of funding through this program. I list some of the clients have gotten products featured in Oprah Magazine, Food and Wine Magazine, Whole Foods, Buy Right Market, and more. I work with mostly farms in California, but now I am working with farms across the country, and I'm still here based in Petaluma. Definitely my home away from home. Do not have a farm, but I still have a garden, which I do love dearly. And that's me.
Thanks, Ellen. We are so thrilled to have this collaboration happening, to use your, but to have you help farmers to have success in accessing these funding and excellent opportunities to kind of take their value-added products to the next level. So without further ado, let's dive into the meat of this presentation. The value-added producer grant. So the RFP, or the request for proposals for this grant, which really details all the specifics about what they want in the application and who's eligible and all those different details. Ellen's holding it up. It was released this Tuesday morning, this week. So we appreciate you signing up and being on board this webinar with such little notice. Because we didn't know until Tuesday morning that this was happening, and we wanted to, and then we found out that the request for proposals is only a 60-day application period instead of a 90-day window, which has been more typical. So we've got a shorter amount of time to accomplish the same goal. So we wanted to really just get going right away and let folks know about this scholarship opportunity. So if you are not familiar with the grant, and even if you are, there's a lot of details. So we're going to spend a few minutes right now. I'm going to start going over some of the main overview points for this grant opportunity, and then Ellen is going to expand upon that and share some real life examples to help hopefully solidify some of the concepts. So this grant, this value added producer grant, you might be wondering, is it for me? Like, I don't know much about it. So is it for me? Well, value added is defined in many ways. And so you need to make sure to be eligible for this grant that you are adding value to your crop through at least one of these methods. It could be changing the physical state, like taking a fresh tomato and making it into a canned tomato sauce. It could be a production method, such as organically producing a crop. It could be physical segregation. It could be a farmer ranch-based renewable energy, or a locally produced product. So maybe your value added idea or concept fits into multiple of those, great, but it needs to at least fit one of those criteria. Next, is this grant for you? There are only certain application types of people or entities that can apply for this grant. For example, CAF as a nonprofit organization, we can't apply for the grant like on behalf of farmers and then like funnel the money towards farmers. So that's why we created this new collaboration of working with Ellen to help have her and her team help you write your proposal, because one of the application types that is allowed is that first bullet point there is independent producers. So farmers at the farm level, you guys are allowed to apply for this grant and one of the main target audiences for this grant. However, we recognize you're really busy, especially at this time of year, getting your season going. And so that's why we're here to offer this help. Another group of applicant type that is allowed are ag producer groups. So a group of growers together could apply as a collaboration. There's specific definitions for all four of these that I can get into if folks need that, but for now, I'll just leave it at that. If a farm or ranch is structured as a cooperatively structured business, that type of entity is allowed. And then majority controlled producer-based businesses. So that gets a little bit more complicated. And if anybody thinks you might be in that definition, let us know in the chat box, and we'll have plenty of time for Q&As here in a little bit. Okay, so hopefully those first two slides of like, is this grant for me? You are able to kind of generally get a sense of, yes, this would work for me, or no, this wouldn't. And now this is another slide to help you determine that. So will your value added, oops, that should say product, will your value added product meet all three of these criteria? Number one, it's created with at least 50% raw commodities that you grow. Number two, you're producing the value added product will expand your customer base. And number three, producing the value added product will increase your farm's revenue. So importantly, your proposal needs to meet all three of these criteria. And Ellen, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I would love to add to that. The fourth point I'll say is that we need to prove that it actually increases the value of the raw commodity so that it is truly a value add. Just turning a tomato into a tomato sauce, if in the end you're making less money on the tomato, then it's not really value added. So in the process of writing the grant, we really dig into those numbers. And I just want to reiterate something you said before, which is while we talk about product a lot because it's easier language wise, just know that you can be selling a tomato as organic and not turning it into a tomato sauce and be eligible for this program. So in that case, you would be growing at least 50% of the tomatoes in our sales projection. Selling those tomatoes as organic would be expanding your customer base and the organic tomatoes and the project that we propose is going to increase your farm's revenue. So in that case, we'd show that selling as organic gives you better pricing in the marketplace than not selling as organic. So it's a product, and it's also can be just raw produce.
Awesome. Thanks for bringing that example up, Ellen, because that's definitely the case. I know my mind and maybe others jumps to, packaged goods and things that we change out of their raw state, but it's important to note that that's not necessarily, you don't have to do that to make this grant program work. Okay, so I'm going to continue on, and folks, feel free to add any questions to the chat box as we go, especially if we see something that comes in, we might pause on a slide and address it in real time if there's something that would help clarify for folks. So some kind of administrative details to this grant this year. So the request for proposals announced earlier this week that the application is due either April 25th electronically or May 2nd if it's mailed, like a hard copy is physically mailed in the mail. And the grant has two main categories of projects that you can apply for. One is a planning grant, which could be up to $75,000, or the other is a working capital grant, which could be up to $250,000. These projects can go for up to 3 years. They estimate that the start date of the project would be September 30th of this year. So there's obviously some time, after projects are submitted by May 2nd, they need to review the proposals and determine who is going to be awarded or funded. And then, that takes a couple months or so, and then you find out if you're going to be funded or not. And then there's a little bit of time before it would actually start. So you can keep like late September, early October this year in mind of when the project would actually start. Whoops. And then another important thing to note is the project or the proposal requires a certain amount of match by the farmer or the applicant as far as the financial element of the project. So, for example, in the past, this has only been a one-to-one match. So if you are going to request $40,000 of funding in the project, you would need to help show in your part of it that you also are going to match $40,000 to the budget. So that could be in cash or in kind, like a one-to-one every dollar match. And so 50% of the money that the farmer contributes can be in the value of what's called in kind, or your time working on the project. And then other in-kind contributions can include the value of the raw commodity used, third-party in-kind contributions. So it doesn't necessarily mean if your project budget that you're asking for the government money from them is $40,000, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to also front $40,000 towards that project. It's highly possible that you could, put $20,000 of in-kind of your time towards matching that budget, and then maybe a smaller amount of cash and some other combination of details. But Ellen's an expert in massaging out a budget to make it work the best for the proposal. So she'll be able to provide more details on that, and maybe your examples mention a little bit about that. New this year is that there's a small amount of the funding of the money that they're going to give out that is only required to have a 1 to 10 match. So only a 10% match, which is not how it's happened before, but this is actually some leftover COVID relief money that got rolled into this grant. So it's possible that, of that, if you had that $40,000 budget, that you would only need to match $4,000 towards that. But it's going to be highly competitive, and you're going to need to make a budget that also does the one-to-one match as well. So you'll have like two budgets. So yeah, we'll just kind of leave it at that. Ellen and I can get more into it in the question and answers if people want to explore that opportunity, but that is available for a small amount of the projects that get funded.
Should I go over Actually, let's wait. So there's a few questions coming in, but maybe we do kind of these details and then do all the questions together. Sorry.
No, thanks for flagging that. I didn't
Yeah.
see that until you flagged it. So yeah, we'll keep going here, and then it's great to have those questions there though, so we don't have that, we end the presentation and then there's just silence for waiting for questions. So thanks folks for adding those, and we'll circle back to them. So some more details about it. So the working capital grant category, if you're asking for less, thanks Alan for muting that person. So if you're asking for less than 50,000 in government funding, that you are not required to have a feasibility study as part of your application package that you submit. So there's kind of a significant threshold there, because having a feasibility study done is a very lengthy and costly process. So if you don't know what that is right now, then you're not going to be getting that done in time to be like using that in the application for right now for this year. But there's still an excellent opportunity to get funding, even if you don't have a feasibility study. It would just have to be under asking for less than $50,000 from the government. So, and then you match that with some of your own. So it could be a project about $100,000 project. And then the grant cannot cover costs of equipment unless it's under $5,000. Some small scale equipment may be possible, but you couldn't put a $40,000 piece of equipment, some harvester tool or some like big oven or something like that. And then this year there were some project priorities that were included. So there's a small amount of points in the scoring rubric for the proposals that would be awarded to folks that have projects that assist rural communities in recovering economically from COVID, ensuring all rural residents have access to rural development programs, reducing climate pollution and increasing resilience to the impacts of climate change through economic support to rural communities. So we're not going to get into the weeds on those details, but if you are a farm in a rural area, there may be an opportunity to get some additional points related to your project to help with the possibility of getting funded. Okay, and then just a few more notes on that. If you have a project, I don't think anybody in the chat box put any projects related to hemp products, but if you were doing that, you need to have all the valid licenses at the local, state, and federal levels. And then there are also additional priority points for projects that increase opportunities for socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers, beginning farmers and ranchers, operators of small or medium-sized farms and ranches, veterans, mid-tier value chains, and farmer or rancher cooperatives, which all of those have definitions to them. I can respond to some in the chat box if somebody's like, what is the definition of X on this screen? I can explain that more in depth. But for now, that's a high-level overview walking through some of the key points for the application this year. And I'm going to turn it over to Ellen to share some insights from her past experiences.
Thank you so much. That was a great overview. We have some questions coming in. Do you want me to address the questions about the grant and then go into specifics, or should we hold?
Maybe ask the specific grant questions, since that was fresh with what we just talked about.
Cool. So we have can finish project. I think you mean product. Feisty Dog Orchard, love your name. Be an in-kind donation. I think what you're asking there is, could you say that, the tomato sauce that you're selling is the value of that is part of the in-kind donation? The answer is no, but the raw commodity value, and unfortunately it is valued by USDA AMS rates. So it's not how much you sell those tomatoes for, it's how the government actually values those tomatoes. But between all that, we can get you to a place with of cash match that works for you. I haven't been in a situation where we got into the the writing of the grant and then got to a place where it was like, oh, we're not going to be able to do this because we don't have the cash, because there's all these different in-kind categories we can use. Can we apply for planning and working capital? So you can apply for a planning grant and a working capital grant at different times. You cannot apply for more than one grant in the same cycle. I kind of mentioned before, you can apply for this grant multiple times, which is really wonderful because it can continue to help you grow. And part of the strategy of how we'd write your application is thinking about what do we apply for now so that you'll be eligible to apply again once you're done with this pot of money. What some people do is they apply for a planning grant. A planning grant will cover the cost of that feasibility study that was mentioned before. And so then they get the feasibility study written, use that feasibility study to then apply for a working capital grant for $50,000 to $250,000. So you can apply to both for the same project, but not at the same time. And no farm can apply for more than one of these grants at the same time. You have to close out one before you start the next. And then I saw you put in the mid-tier value chain. Cool. So those are the two questions.
Great, thanks, Ellen.
Oh, we skipped one.
Oops.
There we go. So first I'm going to give you some real life examples because I feel like it really helps people see what this grant can do. And I do feel like I am such a big proponent of this grant because I've seen the effects that it has. So one farm I'm going to talk about is Little Apple Treats. They're right here near me in Sebastopol, California. They make apple cider caramels from apples that they grow on their historic orchard. And when I started working with them, they were one of my first clients in 2017 that I wrote this grant for. They were doing well. You know, they were at the Ferry Building Farmers Market. They had a nice little following. They had some products up online. They were in Bayreuth and a few key shops in San Francisco. But they'd kind of hit a bit of a plateau. You know, they were doing really well at farmers market, but not as well in the stores. And they wanted to get into some bigger stores to get that wholesale quantity working for them. This happens a lot to folks. You know, when you're at a farmer's market, you're given your whole spiel to each person who comes by, and a part of the reason they're purchasing is the relationship you build. Now, all of a sudden, your product is on a shelf. How is that product developing that same relationship? Well, that's through marketing and packaging design and all these things that cost money that most small farms don't really have the money to pay for. So you can see they had beautiful packaging. But when I look at these, you know, I would think maybe that's all the same product, but it's not. It's 3 different flavors. So buyers, they found, were only buying 1 into their store instead of 3 because it doesn't really look different on the shelf. And customers, even when they go to the shelf, would maybe not register if there were more than 1, that they're making a choice there, that they have 3 to choose from. Also, this packaging was a cost saving thing. So they're bases that are all the same. And then you slip this, you know, slider on to that base so that you can buy a bulk of the base and bring your costs down. The problem was the labor of actually folding those bases. If any of you have gotten that kind of packaging, you know what I mean. It actually takes a really long time to do all that folding to make your packaging. So you want to move to a box that's, you know, that's already together. Well, the way to make that cost, like keep the cost of that down, is to buy in quantity. And where does that money come from to make those first orders of the quantity of boxes? Again, most farms don't have that sitting in the bank to be able to buy 5,000 of those boxes across 5 SKUs. So, you know, 25,000 boxes at one point. So that's kind of what we were dealing with. So next slide, I'll show you what we did with the grant. So with the grant, they were able to get professional design for their boxes. This is one of the flavors. Each one is beautifully designed with a different pattern, making them look very different from each other. All of a sudden, the product is super giftable. Buyers do want more than one because it looks really nice with them. next to each other on the shelf. It also is a box that comes, you know, all together. So their costs went down. So their product actually ended up looking nicer and costing less for them to make because they had that cash to put into a big order of boxes up front. Stuff that the grant covered were the design fees, the purchasing of the packaging, other ingredient costs, sell sheet design, because they wanted to go, as I said, into more grocery, the professional photography. It also helped redesign their website. You can see they ended up getting featured in Martha Stewart Living with the new packaging. And it's not the packaging's fault. It's not the packaging that did it. It's really the product, that how amazing it is, but they won Good Food Awards and Sophie Awards, and just, it really did elevate their brand. Next slide. And as Joanne says, the USDA value-added packaging grant that Ellen got for us was critical in improving our branding, leading to a huge jump in sales and the ability to be picked up by larger accounts such as Italy, Oliver's, and Buy Right Markets. So it did work, like what we were, the goal of the grant funding did come together. Next slide. So another example, which does include a change of physical state too, don't worry, I'll talk about some that doesn't. But we, you know, I love that you kept mentioning tomatoes turned into tomato sauce, because that's always my go-to example too. I don't know why, it's just so easy to conjure up. This is an example of that. So Oya Organic Farm is down in Hollister, California. They're a small family farm with a diverse veggie production. And they were selling mainly at farmers markets. And they kind of had two problems. One, anyone on here that grows tomatoes knows there's a lot of overage production that comes with tomato and blemished things that you can't, you know, you don't have a way to sell. So that was problem number one. Problem number two was they really wanted to grow their CSA. They had a small CSA and felt like it created a lot of stability for them as a small farm. But then it was a year-round CSA. And what they would find is every year they'd onboard new people, get them excited, and then people would trail off in the winter when boxes weren't as vibrant. This kind of core group of members would stay on. And in the spring, those people from before, it was really hard to like reach out to them, convince them to join. So they were having to find a new crop of people to join. And those people then the next winter would fall off again. And it was, the winter is when you need that investment for the seeds, for the costs to prepare for the spring. So those were the two problems. Going back to the tomatoes and to the sauce, tomatoes, especially if you're dry farming, you have, blossom end rot. You also have just weirdly shaped tomatoes, and your decisions there really are to let it just drop and rot in the fields, to leave it on, like to pick it and let it drop, to leave it on the plant, which is going to decrease your yields because it slows down the plant production, or to pick it, pay for it to be picked, and then sell it to a wholesaler, maybe just recouping the costs of picking the tomatoes in the first place. So we were like, what can we do with these overage production that also is going to help with the CSA, keeping those boxes vibrant in the winter? So we kind of had two problems and we killed them both with one stone, or whatever they say. We created value-added products that then kept CSA membership more solid. Next slide. So things that the grant paid for, again, design fees, co-packer fees. So they worked with a co-packer to make those products, online CSA portal build out so that people could sign up and manage their CSA subscription, branded CSA boxes, social media ads, a mailer campaign that, a physical mailer that went to places to get people to sign up, and also a salary for a CSA manager was in there. Marcia said, before working with Ellen to secure a value-added producer grant from the USDA, we had tomatoes rotting in the field. Every season I would think about preserving them, but I didn't have the time to take on the work myself. Now that we have the grant, I'm making our value-added product line a reality and something we are proud of. Next slide. So I gave you those two examples that were really the change in physical state, because when we You know, when we say value added, that's what most of us think of. And it is honestly a good number of the grants that I've written, but I have written grants for a whole bunch of folks. These are the folks that I've written grants for, some people more than one. So we have people on here that had less than $10,000 in sales, in annual sales at the time of applying, to people that have over $1 million in sales at the time of applying. We have people that were in year 2 of farming to multi-generational family farms. It should not stop you from applying for this grant. If you're like, we're new, we hardly have sales, that doesn't matter. I've worked with people who sell through farmers markets, who sell at farm stands, CSAs, local stores, grocery, or just sell as an ingredient to other people. You could also be selling into, I always blank on this word, but like when you're selling into like cafes and
Institutions.
yeah, institutional sales. Like it's not specific on what your sales channel is. People who process on farm, and also people who work with co-packers, from selling crushed tomatoes to apple cider caramels, to dried rose petals, to grass-fed hot dogs, to organic coleslaw mix, to organic grapefruits. So there's kind of 2 ways that I work with folks on grant writing, and we're going to talk more about this with the remainder of the presentation. Let me just look at my notes and make sure that I got everything I wanted to say on that. Yes. Okay.
Also, Ellen, we just have one quick question that relates to what you were just saying, so maybe we could just touch on it now.
Yeah.
Can value-added products such as handmade soaps, tinctures, salves, etc., be eligible for this grant?
Yes, it can. So one of the folks, the Naked Botanical from the last slide, she did herbs that she grew and then made salves. So it's important to know, actually, let me say that, you know, we said, you know, 50% of this is a grant that gets tied to a commodity and then to the value added product, which again, could be tomato sauce, or it could just be organic tomatoes. Doesn't have to be a product as in a packaged product. Because it's tied to a commodity. So when we say you have to grow 50% of the commodity that is in the final product, if you're making a salve, you don't have to grow 50% of the ingredients in that salve. You don't have to like grow the olives and make the olive oil and like the argan, whatever argan comes from, and make the argan oil and like everything that's in there. Say it was a salve that had calendula flowers, you use calendula flowers in it, you'd have to grow 50%, at least 50% of the calendula, because we would apply for like calendula that gets made into salves. It could also be herbs that get made into salves to open that up a little bit if you're doing like mint and thyme and like a bunch of things. But so it doesn't have to be an edible is kind of what that gets to. There is, the one thing is cut flowers are not eligible as a change in physical state. They don't consider just cutting the flower a change in physical state. But if you sell cut flowers as, you know, organic or local or something like that, then you are eligible for those criteria.
Awesome.
Great.
Thanks, Ellen.
That answered it. So yeah, we have one-on-one grant writing and my group mentorship. So I'm going to talk first about the one-on-one grant writing. So when I hear the word grant writer, I typically think of someone who takes a project and finesses it into the language of a funder and spits out an application. And I just want you all to know that that's not the process of working with me. It's much more. So we start with your idea, and I always say you have to start with a project that's worth funding. So we really dig into your numbers. We have to show that what you're doing is actually adding that value. We build sales projections together. We look at, my goal is like, yes, there are a bunch probably of different ways that we could apply and projects you could apply for, but which is the one that's going to move the needle the most for your farm. So it's really both, because basically what this application is you're kind of writing a business plan. It's almost as if you're writing a business plan and bringing it to a bank to get a loan. It's a similar process of like, we're really putting together a business plan and then presenting it to the USDA and saying like, you should invest in this. And so we go through that process of making sure of like making the argument in the first place of what it is that they're investing in and why they're investing in it. So that includes the analysis that I just talked about, market research, budget preparation. We mentioned this before, but building your budget, super important to make sure it's a budget that's going to work for you in real life. And that has to do, yes, with making sure you have in kind, so it reduces how much cash you have to put in, but it also has to do with like, how are you going to be able to ask for reimbursements along the way, and making sure that the way we set up the budget, you're not going to get stuck in a place that you can't ask for a reimbursement and like run out of cash flow to finish the rest of the project. And also, what are we getting funded now so that you can finish this grant and then apply again in the future? And then of course, I do write the application for you and then do all the preparation of all the forms and stuff. So we basically go from your idea as it stands now to this like pack of paperwork that you can print out, sign, and send in. And that I'm super excited to partner this year with CAF to offer this that CAF is offering this scholarship. So they're offsetting the cost of working with me one-on-one so that you have a much reduced rate of paying for that. So it's going to be the farmer is responsible for $2,000 of the cost of that service. The other way that I work with people is through my group mentorship. So I started this last year. Basically with the idea, like I've gotten full with how many of these I can write for people. So how else can I help people write them? And at a time, I had never written one before and I wrote it and I got it funded. So I don't recommend doing it the way that I did it that first year, because I did hand over the grant to my client and then like I was sick. I was literally sick. I won't go into like the disgusting details. But I've over time developed like the strategy that I use to attack the application, I would say, and that it's led to that 100% success rate. So I've based this mentorship on how do I achieve that. So that is all my templates of, but how to prepare your budget and like sales analysis and proving your value add, all the support letter templates and research resources that are like my go-to research resources. I have group calls. There's a Q&A that you have constant access to ask me questions along the way. A preparation checklist. And then I actually review your application and give you feedback and edits before you finalize it and send it in. So that's a great option for you if that $2,000 is still too much of a contribution, or if you don't get the scholarship because there's limited ones and you still want some guidance on how to do this application. As it was mentioned before, there is less money this year, so it would be good, to just have that. If you feel like it would be good to have that support as you go along and write it yourself, is kind of the group mentorship way. Yeah, and in both of those instances, just so you know kind of where I'm always coming from is, like I said, making sure that it's a project that's actually worth funding, both for them, but also for you. Like, yes, there's money out there, but making sure it's going towards things that are actually going to move your farm forward, and also creating an application that's going to score well, because basically there's a scoring rubric and we're trying to get you the greatest score that you can so that you do get funded, because they get funded from highest scoring to lowest scoring. So if you're interested in the mentorship, you can email projects@ellenraleigh.com, but we're going to talk on this webinar more about the one-on-one grant writing because of this awesome opportunity to get a scholarship to work with me one-on-one.
Great, thanks, Ellen. So yeah, that kind of transitions us into a couple more slides, and then we'll hopefully have about 10 minutes or so for questions. So keep putting those in the chat or get ready to unmute and ask them in a few minutes. But just an overview of the application process. Ellen mentioned a bit about this already, but here's kind of a bullet point list of if you're not familiar with the DUNS and SAMS numbers related to the government for applying to grants, like that would be something to do with ASAP. And, you know, analysis on where the farm's cash will come from and different COGS calculations and sales analysis, and projections, making a budget, creating a timeline, collecting letters of support for your project. There's writing the grant narrative, and then the final application prep, and then sending the application to USDA Rural Development Program. So there's definitely a number of steps to do, but we've got a fantastic collaborator here. So that's just kind of give you an overview of it. All right, finally, we're to one of the most exciting parts of this presentation, and that is the scholarship program that we've been mentioning. So as I mentioned in the beginning, CAF as an organization, we're not even eligible to apply for the grant. And then at this point in time, and likely for the foreseeable future, we don't have the capacity internally to have staff members able to help growers actually write their applications for them. But that's where this partnership with Ellen comes in beautifully, and that she does, and she has lots of expertise and success. And so this year, CAF is able to provide up to 3 growers with $4,500 each towards that $6,500 application fee to work with Ellen. So the grower will still be responsible for paying the remaining $2,000, which would be expected next week if you were accepted with your scholarship application, and then we onboarded you next week. But then CAF would pay that $4,500 towards the application fees. So let me go to the next slide. That brings up logistics on the applying to the scholarship. I'm going to drop the scholarship is in a Google form. I'm going to drop the link in the chat box right now. I know this is all very fast and furious, but like we said, we have 30 less days than normal to get these applications created and submitted. So we're going to close the application for the CAF scholarship this Monday, March 7th at midnight. And so, you know, you have this weekend and Monday to fill out this scholarship application form in the link I put in the chat box. And then Ellen and our team are going to review the applicants, and then we're going to be in touch next week. And I have a timeline that I'll go through here. So right now we're on this webinar. Right now the scholarship application process has opened, and I'm going to follow up after this webinar and send everybody an email with this recording to this webinar, and then also this application link and just some kind of high level information. Monday, March 7th at midnight, we're going to close the scholarship application. And then by next Wednesday, we're going to be in touch to let you know whether or not your project or your application was funded or not, or awarded. And we also want to reserve next Thursday, March 10th from 10 a.m. to noon as it being a time that we might need to have a possible short phone call with you to follow up on any questions that we might have after reviewing your online application. So just keep that in mind if you could keep next Thursday in the morning available. And then next Wednesday through Friday, we're hoping to have awarded the applicants and onboarded folks, and you'd be expected to be able to pay your $2,000 portion to Ellen next week. And then starting next week until the end of April, you'll be working with Ellen and her team to get your application together and submitted by May 2nd. So that's kind of the high level timeline overview, and the application form to the scholarship for this is in the chat box. So that brings us to 11 minutes for any questions folks might have.
And just to add to that, like the scholarship, I know I agree, it's a short window, and it's because we have to get going to get stuff done. Mainly the questions are just so we know what your project is, and then also making sure you're eligible. So it's a lot of like, yes, no, I just want to couch that it's not we're not asking you to do like a 30-page toolkit like we will for the grant. It's a short window, but I do think it's like, it's a manageable thing, hopefully, to apply for.
Thanks, Ellen. Yeah. I mean, I would estimate maybe taking 20 to 30 minutes to fill it out. It's many just yes, no, some like multiple, like, check boxes, select a few things, and then a handful of open-ended questions. For example, where we asked you to describe your value-added product idea or ideas on the concept, and to just give us a little bit, a paragraph or so about information for it. So hopefully it shouldn't be too big of a lift. And it looks like we have a question. What are you looking for in the scholarship consideration? Like the scoring of the scholarship. So like Ellen mentioned, there's a number of questions that are yes, no, where those are basically just pulled from the grant, from the value-added producer grant itself, where like if you answered no to it, then like you are automatically, like they wouldn't, your application would be an automatic no for funding. So we're obviously we don't want to use resources to work with folks where we know that the application is going to be automatically a no. So that's going to be the first level. And then we have some numerical scoring for parts of the application to give basically scores to responses for folks to have it be quantified, how robust the response was. So yeah, for the open-ended questions of the application, I wouldn't recommend putting like a 1-sentence answer. It'd be helpful to provide as many details as you could.
I always say that the 3 things I look for, and it's not just going to like, there's a whole process to deciding these, who gets the scholarships, but the 3 things, it's kind of based on, I just lost my train of thought because I started looking at the next question. An application that's going to get good points, like I said. So there's certain scoring, there's a scoring rubric. So looking at a project and knowing, okay, this is a project that we could write a grant application for that is going to score well. That there's enough time to where the idea is now to get to a final application in the time that's provided. And there's a third that I can't think of right now. So if I think of it, I will tell you, but those are kind of the big 2, is like, are we going to be able to get an application together in time? And is the application then going to score well? So that's kind of what we're looking for. Yeah.
And
Said it
then
well. For equipment, I want to use drop and rot fruit to turn into preserves to supply to local markets. It's awesome, but also to supplement our agritourism business. We would need a commercial dishwasher as well as to navigate the county permit process for farm sales. You mentioned it wouldn't cover equipment. Would they not cover the dishwasher? Depends on how much the dishwasher costs. I have gotten some equipment covered, but it is under that $5,000 limit. Just so you know, agritourism is not considered part of this grant. I have, though, just last year got someone who sold their free range eggs through the camping that they have on their farm through Hip Camp, and they sell the eggs. So it can be an agritourism farm, but we would focus on, again, the value added part of what you're doing, not the agritourism part, even though in your mind it's all put together, in their mind that's not what they're funding. So yeah, so possibly if it's under that $5,000. And in terms of navigating the county permit process, no, this is not like an R&D. It won't pay for your organic certification. For example, if you like work with a co-packer that has setup fees for like organic products, it would cover that, but it's not going to cover for like you say to get different permits or to get your organic certification or anything like that. You kind of have to have the things in place that you need to carry out the project when you apply. Because we're telling them, basically the way to think about that is like, if someone gave you a business plan and was like, invest in this, and then you said to them, okay, we're like ready to invest tomorrow. And then the person responded, well, we can do it if this happens and this happens and this happens and this happens. Like all of a sudden you're like, you know, would you invest in that versus someone who's like, we know we can do this. They want to see that you have things set up to be able to carry out the project. But yes, it would cover labels, packaging, and sales. Sales support, for example, sell sheet design, someone calling people and selling, delivery, drivers, like shipping, all that stuff. And that's a really good point to Robin, that one thing to think about is even if what you're excited about is this piece of equipment and it's over $5,000, I don't want you to negate the whole grant, because what we can do is cover other costs that you're already incurring and will incur to free up the cash flow to have to put towards that thing that this grant doesn't cover.
Right. And am I wrong, Ellen, in saying like, could putting that, say it's a $6,000 dishwasher, could putting that $6,000 dishwasher in the budget as something that the farm's going to pay for to like contribute? No, that can't work that way. Okay.
No, it doesn't. Yeah, I know.
All right. We've got a couple minutes left. I don't think we have any open questions in the chat box or anybody raising their hand to unmute, but if you have something on your mind, please feel free to raise your hand. We can unmute or drop it in the chat box.
I can just kind of spur while we wait. Because someone had said, is there a link for the group mentorship? Do you mind, Callie, if I put that in there?
Nope.
Okay. Someone earlier had said they were here to find out what it can be used for or something, like what expenses are covered. So we talked about some of them through the examples and things. But I usually like to think of it, it's hard to talk and copy at the same time. I like to think of it in categories just so that it helps me think through it. So production costs. So VAP, oh, there's a few more. I just dropped the link. Cool, this is all related to what I'm talking about. So I'll bring these in. What about upgrading community kitchens for use to create value-added products, shipping? Yeah, okay, so I'll talk about that. So build outs, build outs are not eligible. Like I want to build out a kitchen space or I want to build out a retail space. Again, it could cover some other cash flow so that is possible for you to invest in. Actually purchasing vehicles. These are like the big ones that people ask me that aren't. Purchasing vehicles, no. There is some leasing of vehicles that could be included. The big equipment, no. Anything related to actually growing the crop, no. So, you know, a harvester or irrigation or something, this goes from even harvesting the crop, no. It's like so if you're like harvesting the tomatoes, that wouldn't be covered. But if you're then like washing the tomatoes and stickering them and then selling them, the washing and stickering and selling is covered. So shipping, yes, shipping products to wholesale customers, shipping your e-com orders and the boxes that they ship in and like the packaging material, like all the bubble wrap or whatever. The buckets I like to think of are production costs. So that can be ingredients, other ingredients, packaging, your co-packer fees, like the labor to sticker stuff or to actually cook it, all the things that produce the product. Utilities, so if it's an on-farm processing facility, the actual electricity bills. If you're like renting cold storage space or something, those kinds of things. Admin stuff, so your QuickBooks subscriptions or your Squarespace or you're on Farmago and like they have fees. Then advertising and marketing, so digital ads or billboards or local magazine ads or radio promotions, not swag, so not a hat with your farm's name on it, but stuff that's promoting the product. and sales. So like the person who's sales and delivery. So like, yeah, the shipping costs, the delivery driver, the person who's making sales calls, the materials you use to actually sell the product, the postcard that you leave with people, etc. Those are kind of the big buckets.
Great, that brings us right to one. So we should probably wrap it up, but I think we don't have any unanswered questions currently. I'm just gonna drop the link to the CAF scholarship application. Like I said, I'll send everybody who is registered for this event an email after this with the recording and links to things. And thanks in advance, folks, for the short timeline. And please feel free to share the, forward the email with the details to anybody else you think might be interested when you get it. Anything else from you, Ellen?
I think that's it. Yeah, I just really encourage people to apply. I have not worked with someone who was like, I wish I hadn't taken this on, because it's really those costs that are needed in today's marketplace to do well, that there isn't really another way to cover. So the more farms that have access to this type of funding, I think the better. And I'm excited that it's small and medium-sized farms that I get to work with to pull this off. Yeah. So thank you all for what you do. And let's get you a little money to do it.
Great, thanks. And the question, I'm gonna send out this video recording within a couple hours. So check your email a little bit later. All right, thanks folks, take care.
Thank
Bye.
you.